idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back. After a several-week hiatus, some holidays, and a whole bunch of playoff matchups, we have returned to recap the semifinals and finals matchup of the 2024 season of the League About Nothing. Al, you still with us?
Oh, we got some work to do.
Yeah. We let this one go a little bit longer than we normally do, but that was because we were spending Christmas and New Year's with our family, and those happened to just fall on the days that we normally do most of the work for this podcast. And since none of you have seen fit to pay us for it yet, we had to prioritize that.
Thanks, Christmas. Can
So
they
we're
just
gonna-
make that like a national holiday? Can they make it one of the federal holidays where it falls like on a Monday, like every
we
fourth
observe it on a
Monday
Monday,
of the
yeah.
year or some? Just get it on a set date, like Halloween too. Come on, why are we messing around?
Well, I
I
mean,
don't
they
even-
are on set dates. You want them on a set day. You want the
Yeah,
Thanksgiving
exactly.
treatment. You want Thursday for Thanksgiving and Saturday for Christmas or something.
Right. I mean, retailers start celebrating Christmas like 2 months beforehand anyway. Does it matter what specific date it falls on anymore?
It's actually funny you say that because the whole like Christmas shopping season really kicks off in earnest after Thanksgiving with the whole
August?
Black Friday thing. No, August. And this year was the shortest span of time between Black Friday and Christmas that we've had in a very long time because of how late Thanksgiving fell. And let me tell you, as someone who works delivering packages that everyone is ordering for Christmas, you felt it this year that there was a little bit of a time crunch.
Yeah, see, we need to space these out better.
So we'll look into that. We'll see if we can get someone to do something about that. Maybe Biden
Clearly,
can do that on his way out the door.
Clearly, our recording schedule is more important.
Obviously. All right, so we're gonna do things a little bit differently this show because we've got 2 weeks worth of stuff to cover, and normally we would probably just kind of gloss over that first week, but considering it was the semifinals, we don't really want to do that. So we're gonna cover all the trades first up to the semifinal matchups, and we're gonna discuss the semifinal matchups. Then we're gonna pop back into it, discuss all the trades that took place between the semis and the finals, and then we'll discuss the finals.
Yeah, because otherwise some of these trades aren't going to make any sense out of
Exactly.
context.
So we want everyone to be able to understand what's happening in real time. Although I would wager a guess that anyone listening was there and probably already has the context. So,
Fair point. Fair point.
all right. We're going to hop right into the trades. We ended off on trades on December 17th. We had 4 trades on December 17th. 3 of them took place either before or as we were recording our last episode. There was one more that took place after that. It's the first one we're going to get to this evening. It was a trade between Judd and Al. Al picked up Zach Moss. Judd picked up a 2024 or 2026 fourth round pick attached to Flinch's roster and Tyler Goodson. Neither one of these teams were involved in the semifinals at the time, so this was purely rearranging the bench pieces and draft picks for next year. We have
Or
the
for
manager
2
here who
years from now.
purchased Zach Moss, so explain yourself, sir.
Trade of the week. Listen, I've been chasing Zach Moss for about how many years has he been in the league? How
I don't
long
know,
has
but
this
he's not that
league-
fast. You should have been able to catch him by now.
How long has this league existed? I've been trying to get Zach Moss for so long. And it finally happened.
Yep, and Goodson and a fourth round pick, not really a massive price tag. It looks like Goodson and Moss will both be backups next year, most likely.
Moss was one of the least effective starters in the league this year before he hurt his neck and missed the rest of the year and watched Chase Brown explode down the stretch. So I don't think that either of these guys are expected to be big time contributors next year. But, I've always liked Zach Moss, and it just feels like they'll be some spot for him in a committee somewhere. And he can catch a pass, he can block, he can handle a workload if you need to. He's not going to be efficient with it, but he can do it if he needs to. So it just seems like there should be a spot on an NFL roster for a guy like that.
Sure. He'll find a landing spot. It's, again, as a depth piece, most likely. I think this was his only real best chance to be the starter that he's going to get in his career after.
Yeah, that his starting days are over.
So, it's a trade.
Sometimes you trade with your heart and not your head.
Sure. And I mean, like I said before, this is fairly low stakes. Goodson, I'm pretty sure he was on the waiver wire this year.
Yeah, at various points. He's been bouncing around rosters in the NFL and in our fantasy league.
I mean, I definitely had him on my roster over the offseason, and then I traded him in the year, but then he was dropped. So, Goodson's not anything special. He's a serviceable backup when he's called upon, but even when Taylor was injured this year, Goodson didn't outshine, who's the other one there? Trey Sermon. So,
right. That's a problem.
So for Judd, picking up that 4th round pick to exchange one backup for another makes a lot of sense. For you,
yeah,
your best, your biggest crush there, Moss, for a 4th round pick and a backup. That's fine.
I'll take it.
All right, we're going to move on to our next trade. This one, a little bit bigger stakes, shall we say, between Big and JMC. Big acquired one Brock Purdy. You may have heard of him. And in return, JMC received JJ McCarthy. You might also have heard his name once or twice. So this was a big boy trade.
Yeah, this was a very interesting trade. Big's been one of our most vocal JJ McCarthy supporters since early in the offseason last year.
Yep.
And he's been kind of holding this chip, waiting to cash in. We knew at some point it was coming. He was going to need another quarterback to make it through to the finals and to potentially win. And he cashed him out.
I am going to disagree with half of what you just said. I don't think he wanted to cash him out. I don't think he was waiting to cash him out. I think this was an offer that he saw as good enough that it would be silly not to take it.
Well, knowing the future as we do, and knowing the end results, he certainly needed it.
Yes, yes. Obviously, it worked out very much the right way for him, but I don't think he was. I think his full intention was to just hold McCarthy, and whenever McCarthy gets either the starting job in Minnesota, or if for whatever reason he gets traded or whatever happens, I think he just likes McCarthy. I don't think this was I'm going to hold on to this. It's an insulated value piece. I'll be able to move it. I think he just wanted the guy.
One of the reasons that people were so high on McCarthy was the landing spot, because they saw what Kevin O'Connell has done with every quarterback that's come through his system. It's a very quarterback friendly system.
Yeah, and he's elevated the play of other quarterbacks who we've seen be not so great elsewhere.
And I think that's kind of the impetus behind JMC making this move, is he wanted that upside that JJ McCarthy brings. Purdy, as well as he's played, seemingly going into the offseason with questions of his own. And this was obviously pre-nerve injury that he suffered, another throwing arm injury. He goes into an uncertain contract situation. We assume he's going to get a big extension, but his play down the stretch wasn't super encouraging. I mean, he cost him a few games with late turnovers. The system, he wasn't as productive as the team kind of crumbled around him. I assume these things kind of played into JMC's thought process of trying to potentially aim for more ceiling.
And at the time we were a couple weeks removed from Minnesota actually getting to the spot where they're at now, where they were competing for the 1 seed. They had a couple of tough games. It really would have been pretty easy for them to lose a game in the last few weeks, like against Green Bay or something like that, where they wouldn't be in that position for the 1 seed, and it would be less likely that Darnold would be retained. But I think mostly the way you put it is right. He probably wanted to get out from Purdy before, that big contract comes through or doesn't come through. we've seen San Francisco move on from, Garoppolo, and Garoppolo brought them to a Super Bowl.
Right. It's always a risk when you're moving a proven young quarterback asset. So
If I
it's not without risk on both sides of this trade.
if I was on the JMC side of this, I would have wanted another piece as well. It wouldn't have had to be like a significant piece, but I think just McCarthy, who's young and a first round pick, but in an awkward situation himself, and now potentially behind someone else, unproven. I'd have wanted a little bit more to move off of Purdy.
Yeah, something else to kind of mitigate the risk a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a chance at this point that we don't see JJ McCarthy for more than just another year.
Yeah.
his entire rookie year was a wash. He was on IR the whole season. We didn't think he was going to play anyway, but now it looks like next year may be a wash, and who knows going forward. Although things can change quickly when you have a early first round pick at quarterback. They usually don't sit on the bench for long. We don't see a lot of Aaron Rodgers situations where a guy's sitting for multiple years, and Sam Darnold ain't no future Hall of Famer like Brett Favre. So,
no, probably not. Although, if he sticks around in Minnesota and plays like this for a few years,
right, may have a different story.
Yeah. Well,
may have a different ending to that story.
Doesn't seem likely, but stranger things have happened. I mean, Steve Young comes to mind. He didn't, do anything till he was 30.
Right. Yeah, that was a much different time.
It's true.
Without free agency.
All right, let's move on. Our next trade was between Flea and Criddle. In this one, Flea picked up Jerome Ford and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, saying, I love the Browns. I need all the Browns players. And on the other side of things, Criddle picked up the injured Stephon Diggs and, at the time, injured J.K. Dobbins. This is pretty straightforward. Flea was still in the playoffs here. She was facing Mel's team in the semifinals. She was looking to add, pieces that would help her that week. She was shy at quarterback. Thompson-Robinson was starting. Same with Ford. She wasn't really as short at running back, but still, a starting running back's nothing to say no to. Diggs is out for the year. Dobbins, I don't think at the time we had heard that he was close to coming back. She might have been a little bit more hesitant to trade him if that was the case, but I don't think we knew at the time that he was going to be back like a week later.
No, she just did what she needed to do week after week.
Story of her season.
She continued to trade injured players for players who were going to produce that week to try to continue winning and continue her season. So this is just another in the long line of what she's done the entire year, really year plus, honestly. She finally cashed in that Diggs chip and that Dobbins chip. She had him sitting on her IR. We figured it was just a matter of time. She was just looking for whatever production she could get. And Ford was productive until he also got hurt.
Yeah.
But that didn't come until the finals. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson, not very productive, but, it's always necessary to have quarterback depth in a best ball in the playoffs.
Yeah. And she was down to only 2 starting quarterbacks at the time. So
yep.
It was an important move for her to add depth. Well, it was a good idea for her to add depth, I guess I should say.
Yeah, Diggs and Dobbins certainly weren't scoring any points for her, so she did what she had to do. And for Criddle, he took a shot on a couple of injured guys, hoping that they can bounce back and recover some of their value going into next year.
Yeah. And Criddle was one of the last teams to be eliminated from the playoff hunt. So his team could definitely use guys like Diggs and Dobbins. They won't be, roster cloggers or guys that he's going to have to turn around and flip himself. They can be contributors for his team next year.
Yep. Yeah, he certainly could have used the depth.
Trade that makes sense for pretty much everyone there.
Yep.
All right.
These are the kind of trades that you expect to see when you don't have a trade deadline.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on. Our next trade was between your team and Flinch's team. This one's pretty straightforward. Flinch picked up Patrick Taylor, backup running back for the 49ers, and in return, you picked up a 2026 fifth-round pick attached to Flinch's roster.
This is basically he was not the backup running back. He was the starting
He
running
was
back
the starter.
for
I was
San
going to say,
Francisco.
this is
He-
the mirror of the trade the week before between you and I, where
Right.
I got the 5th and you got Taylor.
Right, when we thought Taylor might start and Garendo was dealing with an injury, we thought he might miss the week before. It didn't end up happening, but he did miss this week. Not that Taylor contributed much to Flinch's semifinal matchup, but he took a shot on a guy who was about as cheap as you can get for a starting running back.
Yeah, it makes sense. Flinch was still in the playoffs at the time. You were eliminated. We don't have to spend much time on this one.
Nope.
All right. Next trade between Flea and JMC. Flea picked up Mason Rudolph and Rashad Bateman. In return, JMC picked up Derek Carr and Olamide Zaccheaus.
Yep. And again, trading away injured players for players that were active and projected to score points that week. That was about it. She needed quarterback depth pretty badly, so she cashed in that Derek Carr for Rudolph and Bateman, and I think she had plans to flip Bateman because he got traded almost immediately after this to Big's team.
Yeah, Bateman didn't stick around long. But, Carr not playing right now. Zaccheaus basically had done nothing all year until the week of the finals.
Right.
Or actually, no, the week of
Last
the
2
semifinals.
weeks.
The last 2 weeks, he's put up big points. So a timely acquisition for JMC on getting Zaccheaus, but he was eliminated. So,
Right.
didn't really do much for him.
He did end up on a finals roster, so
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
We're working on it. We'll get there when we get there.
Foreshadowing. Is
So-
it foreshadowing if you just say what happened exactly?
And I don't think foreshadowing is the right word there. This is just one more example, like you said, of Flea doing whatever she could to maintain her roster in this year. But I wonder how much of this is going to come home to roost next year, essentially.
Well,
Guys
she was
like
not worried about next year at any
No.
point in the last year. She
No.
was very committed to this plan, and you know what? It got her all the way to the finals, and we'll talk about what happened when we get there.
Again,
But
we'll get there when we get there. But it just every time we do another one of these trades, I think like, man, this makes a lot of sense in this context. But then I look at it and think, Rudolph and Bateman, like, yeah, Bateman would be fine for next year, but obviously Bateman's already off the roster. But Rudolph versus Carr for next year, not really much of a contest there. You'd obviously much rather have Derek Carr.
yeah,
Which at some point, enough trades like that, and you get to a point where it's worrisome for next year. Our next trade, which took place about an hour and a half after.
yeah, it
after the
wasn't
last one.
long.
So this was a trade between Big and Flea, who obviously would later go on to face each other in the finals, but were on opposite sides of the semifinals bracket at this time. Big picked up Bateman and a 2025 third round pick attached to my roster. Didn't know that was floating out there. Forgot about that. And Flea picked up Tyler Boyd, Mike Gesicki, and Aiden O'Connell.
Yep.
Now this trade came to mean a whole lot the week after. I mean, a whole lot the week after. But, in this instance, it was just the same as we've discussed. Flea needed a little bit of depth. O'Connell's a starting quarterback for now. Gesicki's a starting tight end. I want to say for now, I don't know what his contract situation. He might be there next year. I don't know.
He's a free agent.
Is he a free agent? That's not surprising. I wouldn't be shocked if he came back on another 1-year deal there, though.
Yep.
He seemed to get along pretty well with that offense. The depth chart in Tennessee has been a little bit funky, but Boyd's been getting a pretty high snap share, 50% to, a little bit higher.
Yeah, this was again what she needed to do. She had a draft pick that she needed to turn into points for this week to try to win this week. She needed quarterback and tight end depth pretty badly, as we can see by her flurry of quarterbacking trades. So she did what she had to do, picked up players that helped her win that week.
And they did. She made it through. It's a little bit unusual to see two teams both still alive in the semifinals make a trade like this. I mean, obviously they weren't playing each other that week. You almost never see teams that are playing each other that week trade with each other outside of when you and I face each other in redraft. However, um, and I'm convinced you only trade with me on those weeks to keep your streak of trading against me going. But anyway, it's unusual to see two teams both still alive in the playoffs making trades like this, wouldn't you say?
Right, yeah, not a usual strategy. I mean, for one, it's not usually don't want to weaken your own team. Big took guys that, well, he took a pick that wasn't going to help him, and he took Bateman that really wasn't likely to see his lineup for a handful of guys that could have contributed. But he was clearly very confident that he didn't need the extra depth for for this week at least. But it almost came back to bite him in the finals.
We'll get there when we get there. Yes. All right. Let's go on to our next one here. It was between Big and Al. You picked up that 2025 third round pick attached to my roster, which I'm pretty sure made it the fourth time it was traded in 4 days. Or third time anyways. And in return, Big picked up Nick Chubb and Keelan Robinson. Now, I'm pretty sure this is the 5th time you guys traded Nick Chubb back and forth this season. Maybe the 12th. I wasn't really keeping track. You want to talk about this one?
Yeah, he definitely wanted Nick Chubb back. And he, through his various trades, he had managed to clear up some roster spots. So he had an open IR spot. I know he wanted Chubb. And I figured the early third was probably fair value for Chubb. We don't know what's going to happen. He's going into free agency. He's obviously been very productive, but this year, he's struggled a little bit coming back from a very serious injury. We don't really know what's going to happen. Most likely, he probably ends up back in Cleveland, and 1 year kind of prove it deal that veteran running backs tend to get at this point in their careers. So he could very well be very productive next year. There's obviously some risk involved, which is why the third round pick, the cost was not super high for him to take a chance on a guy who could be very impactful. For me, how much I love my my liquidity. I'd rather have the value in draft pick form so I can do other things with it.
Yeah, who needs players? If I have draft picks, I can get players with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, no one was surprised to see you trading players for picks. And no one will be surprised when you don't actually use any of those picks and instead turn around and trade them for players.
Seems unlikely.
All right, so let's move on because neither one of these players had any real impact on the rest of the season.
Yeah, Chubb's on IR, and Robinson didn't last on the roster very long.
Our next trade, also involving Big. Big acquired Keenan Allen, a 2025 second round pick attached to Mel's roster, so pretty late. We knew at that point Mel was one of the last 4 teams. And a 2025 fourth round pick attached to Judd's roster, so, middle late. And in return, Judd picked up DK Metcalf. I probably should have mentioned at the start this was a trade between Big and Judd, but we got there in the end. So this one's pretty straightforward to me. Judd wanted to get a little bit younger at wide receiver, I'm guessing, and was willing to send out a couple of picks to do that. Keenan Allen, 32, going to be 33 next year. DK Metcalf, 27. That's 5-6 years age difference right there.
Yeah, it ended up being very impactful because Keenan Allen pretty easily outscored DK Metcalf. At least in this week. I don't know about the finals week. I have to look that one up. But
they were pretty much the same.
The week that he traded for him, he clearly outplayed DK Metcalf. So it ended up being very impactful. And he also got the extra picks, which he would have for later if he needed to cash them in the finals week.
Which I can't speak to right now, but I'm sure he did. I don't remember, but I'm sure some of these were used.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get there when we get there. See how many times I can say that tonight. Every time I say it, I'm going to take a drink.
Hopefully of water or we won't make it through this.
I remember discussing with Big, I can't remember if it was in the league chat, in the private chat, in LAN 2, in some other league, whatever it was, how I thought that Keenan Allen was being undervalued for next year. That I thought he would be back with Chicago and be pretty much just as productive as he was this year.
Keenan Allen's been undervalued for like the last decade.
Okay, you don't count. No, stop. Keenan Allen's been perfectly reasonably valued by everyone in the fantasy community. Stop. But then to see him go out and trade for Keenan Allen, I decided I wanted to take credit for this, but I couldn't find where I said that. And I'm sure I said it. I remember him commenting on it at the time, but I couldn't find where it was because there's too many chats.
Must have been in land too, because I didn't see it.
Had to have been. All right, but Keenan Allen, second rounder, fourth rounder for DK Metcalf. It's good value for both these teams. You know, Judd gets a piece that'll be on the roster for a little bit longer. Big got a piece that was going to help him this year and that flexibility to do more between now and the finals. Or
yeah, it was
the finals, I should say.
It was a really smart trade. I mean, he tiered down into the same production level, and he also picked up some future capital to kind of make up for the age difference.
Yeah. So our next trade was between Big and Judd. It was DK Metcalf for Keenan Allen, a second and a fourth. And then our next trade was between Big and Judd. It was Keenan Allen, a second and a fourth for DK Metcalf.
So this trade a couple of times.
Yeah, the first time they did this trade, apparently one of them, I think it was, I don't remember who, doesn't matter, had an illegal roster, so it had to be reversed. They reversed it, fixed the roster, and then redid the trade. We've had to do this a couple times lately as a league. We really gotta stop torturing Mel like this.
Yeah, we do this way too often.
Anyway, so they eventually figured out what the rosters were supposed to look like and redid the trade. All right. And then a short while later, Big made another trade, this time with Benign Rug. Seriously, Big made like 15 trades in 2 days. It was a flurry.
It was a one-man trade flurry.
You know, someone had to do it, I guess. Well, how else were we going to have content? All right, so the next one was between Big and Benign Rug. Big picked up Cedric Tillman, a 2025 fourth-round pick attached to Al's roster, and a 2025 fifth-round pick attached to Rug's roster. In return, Rug picked up the 2025 second-round pick attached to Mel's roster that Big had just picked up in the Keenan Allen trade, and Trey Tucker. Cedric Tillman's been on IR since his concussion, I don't know, more than a month ago now.
Yep.
And I hope he's okay, but man, that's a scary proposition to be out that long.
Yeah, this definitely wasn't a trade for this year. We finally, after long last, got to see the upside of Cedric Tillman with the brief Jameis Winston show before the concussion, and then before Jameis Winston got unceremoniously sent back to the bench. But we saw that upside, and I know that Tillman's a guy that Big has liked for a long time, pretty much since he was in college. And so to finally see that play out on the field, it was just a matter of time before he ended up acquiring him onto his roster. Yeah. Big gets his guys one way or another.
By hook or by crook. And on the other side of things, for Rug, we'd seen that brief glimpse of Tillman being good, but we've also seen a lot of Tillman basically not doing anything his entire rookie year. And outside of that 3-game stretch this year, we've basically seen Tillman do nothing his entire rookie year and the rest of this year. Rugg could easily think, hey, that was just a flash in the pan. Hey, it was just the fact that Jameis was throwing 60 times a game and didn't care that he was also throwing a couple pick sixes and that the team had all but abandoned the entire run game. Could be that it was a breakout for Tillman, and once he comes back from the concussion either next year or maybe this week, I don't know, he'll go right back to being a top 10 wide receiver. But that doesn't seem 100% likely. So I think for Rugg, it was hey, someone's offering me a second rounder for this guy that has been a little bit up and down. And, he got in a trade last year and wasn't drafted. It was drafted like 4th or 5th round, I think. So it's not a guy that he probably had a lot invested in. So getting a second round pick makes a lot of sense for him.
Yeah, it was definitely the safer option to just cash out and take the value of the second round pick versus the risk reward. There's a chance that, he could go back to exploding every week and be a wide receiver 1. But we've seen this happen many times where players have put up incredible stretches like this just to fade back to being irrelevant. So obviously the safer bet is to take the pick, and hopefully he can do something else with that. Big, obviously shooting for upside. He has the roster where he can afford to do that. Take shots on home runs.
And getting Trey Tucker back is not a bad consolation prize either. Tucker's had a decent season in his second year and also has had a few boom weeks. Obviously, he's been healthier for longer, so those boom weeks have been more spread out, but there have been some pretty good ones. He's a solid depth piece.
Oh yeah, Tucker's definitely got an equally high ceiling if they can kind of get a more legitimate offensive environment around him.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've seen what Bowers can do. We've seen what Myers can do. He could very easily slot in, as he has most of this year, as the kind of tertiary target. If you have a better quarterback, maybe your third target actually produces more for fantasy. It's very possible. Smart to get him included.
All right, we've got one more that took place before we can go cover those semifinal matchups. Here's the real trade of the week. Between Al and Flea, you picked up a 2027 fifth-round pick attached to Flea's roster. How does she still have any picks left? And in return, she picked up your, I don't know, top three crush. We'll put them up there with Mims and Moss. Dante Pettis, wide receiver for New Orleans at the moment. How is it that Dante Pettis is 29 years old?
He's been around for a long time.
I don't know whether I thought he was 35 or 27, like honestly.
Well, this was all about timing because I had traded her Marquez Valdez-Scantling a few weeks ago, and he had been New Orleans' #1 receiver. He actually popped off for a couple of big games on her roster, but he was injured going into the Monday night game, and she just wanted to make sure that she had whatever depth she could potentially get into her lineup. Pettis ended up being the #1 target. He didn't get a lot of fantasy points because he's Dante Pettis. But, she was just basically looking for anything that could potentially help her on the last day of that playoff week. And so Pettis was it. He was the next guy up for the sad sack Saints.
I would like to point out right now, after everything, Dante Pettis' season fantasy points currently rest at 27.9 on the season. So obviously this was going into the late, was it the Monday night game or something?
Yep.
So this was just a last minute, hey, it's a close matchup. Let me try anything to make sure I advance, which makes sense.
Yep. We discussed it ahead of time. And if MVS was going to get ruled out, she was going to pull the trigger on the trade. I mean, at the cost of a 2027 fifth, whatever. Is that even a real pick?
A fifth round pick, 2 years, 3 years in the future.
Is that even a real pick? Come on. He did get 7 targets. I mean, he was heavily targeted, just didn't really translate to much points because Spencer Rattler and the rest of the Saints offense is not very good.
Well, I didn't mention it before, but Patrick Taylor, who Lynch picked up, ended up with like 3.5 points, but he did have 5 targets, only caught 1 ball. So like if he just catches a few more of those targets, a couple PPR points and stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is what happens when you're dealing with fringe guys that are getting traded for fifth round picks.
Yeah.
If they were better, they would go for more.
Yes, if they were better. So that brings us up to all the trades that took place before the end of the semifinals matchups. So let's pause in our recap of all these trades and go take a look at those semifinal matchups.
Yep.
There was one between Big and Flinch, and the other between Mel and Flea. Which one would you like to start with?
Start with the #1 seed.
All right, the #1 seed was Big. This round 2 playoff matchup, Big beat Flinch. Big put up a 284.89, and Flinch put up a 208.60. Not a particularly close matchup here. 76-point difference. Big's teams was just rolling. This was his first game off the bye, and it doesn't seem like his team lost anything with that week off.
No, we saw Flinch's ceiling the week before when he dropped 270 plus points in the first round, but unfortunately he could not keep pace with Big this week.
Yeah, even if he had put up that 273 that he put up in the first round, he still would have lost by,
Right.
11 points. This is the story with Flinch's team this year, though. He was having high highs, but fairly low lows as well. This was the lowest score of any of the four remaining teams. I mean, 208 is not a bad score, but when you're facing all playoff teams, it's probably not going to get the job done.
Yep. Yeah,
You know,
not
this,
enough. Not when you're dealing with a team like Biggs roster who has basically a historically high ceiling.
yeah. Yeah, this was a slightly over the median most weeks score, not a, win your playoff matchup score. The tough part of his team was and remains the tight end spot. Cole Kmet 10.4, Dalton Kincaid 9.0. I mean, they're both essentially double digit scores, but it's not a lot.
Yeah, he just didn't have enough boom, had too many holes to keep pace with Biggs' team.
Yeah. And we saw same story that we've seen all year. Lamar Jackson, 23 points, Derrick Henry, 22 points for Jackson, Derrick Henry, 23 points. That's a great combo. It's still, to me, kind of flabbergasting that you can get that kind of scores from a running back quarterback combo, whereas
Yeah,
normally they
especially
cancel each other out somewhat.
well, especially when the running back doesn't catch any passes.
True.
You
Yeah.
would you would think we're not talking about Breeze and
Well,
Kamara,
that and when the quarterback runs so much.
right? But yeah, there was plenty of points to go around. Got him all the way into the top four. So it was a good roster. Just
Yeah.
I mean, just not good enough
Yep.
this year.
An impressive season to be sure. Getting into the top four, and I don't actually remember who finished third. Let me take a quick look at that. Oh,
Yeah,
Mel won the third place game over Flinch, but we don't not really that important. But his team was good, and you saw some guys that were acquired in season make his semifinals roster there, like basically the entire trade that he and I did, Mooney, Jennings, and Nix all made his starting roster here. So
Yep.
in-season acquisitions paying off well for him, but a little bit shy on what he needed.
Yeah, he did well to beef up his roster during the season. Got him, to the Final Four. Just
Yep.
couldn't get him over that last hump. But
Yeah.
yeah, that pretty much happened to everyone who faced Big. No matter how many points you score.
Yeah, right. We'll get there when we get there. For big side of things, 33-point day from HN, 34-point day from Keenan Allen, just shy of 30 points from Debo Samuel and James Conner. Same with James Cook. Just too many guys putting up 30 points to overcome. Let's go take a look at the other matchup for the semifinals. It was Flea, who put up a 245.37, taking down Mel, who put up a 228.34. Obviously, this one a much closer matchup, and it was still somewhat in doubt going into that Monday night game, which is why Flea picked up Dante Pettis.
Yep. She did what she needed to do. She continued to buy. We went through all the trades, all the pieces she acquired. She did enough to get by this week, just like she did enough to get by the week before. Just continue to drag her team into the finals.
Yeah, and this is the first time in a few years that Mel hasn't made the finals. This was his, I think, first semifinals loss. We should ask him whether it was better or worse to lose in the semifinals as opposed to the finals. I always hated losing in the finals, which I did on a regular basis in our redraft league.
Well, ours wasn't for money. In this league, you get more for second place than third place. So
I don't think I would have cared if it was for money. I just hated losing in the finals so much.
it hurts that much more. The closer you get, the more it hurts.
Yeah. For this one, 40-point day from Jonathan Taylor basically carried Flea over the finish line. Outside of her having a 40-point score and Mel's top score being, I think, AJ Brown with 27, these teams put up remarkably similar points. Like if you just look at the difference between that, it would have been a 4-point game. It's just Flea got one boom game and everybody else on both rosters was good to very good, but no one else had a great game.
Yeah, these are both very good rosters. Obviously, we saw the way they finished, in the top. These two teams were two of the top three finishers. So obviously they have at this point, you're looking at very talented rosters up and down. And they mostly delivered in the playoffs. I mean, 245 points is a really good score. That would be highest score of the week very often during this last season.
And even 228, I think would have made it once or twice because we did have a few down weeks across the board.
Yep.
The impressive thing for me was looking at some of the guys who made Mel's roster. Amir Abdullah, 20-point day. Kareem Hunt, 17-point day. Adam Thielen, who he had literally just acquired, 18-point day. Cooper Rush, same thing, just acquired in that Adam Thielen trade, 15.7. A bunch of I don't know if they were all last minute, but all in season and late additions that were heavy playoff contributors.
Yeah, and very budget friendly acquisitions. He got all these guys for very cheap, and they were all impactful.
Yeah, impressive team management, even if it didn't get him there in the end.
Yep, got him a top 3 finish.
Oh, Abdullah was in that trade too. I was gonna check how much he paid for him on waivers, but no. Thielen, Abdullah, and Rush, 3 players making his roster from that trade. Who would have? Jeez, who would have expected that? I guess Mel did because he made the trade.
Right.
Yeah, and an impressive season from Mel's team. You know, a little disappointing at the end, but I don't know. He'll be back strong. He's got good draft capital, which I don't think can be said of any of the other teams still here. I'm 90% sure Flinch has no capital. I know that Flea has no capital, and I don't think Big has much. So, you know, Mel doesn't have quite the complement of picks that a lot of teams do, but he has more than the other playoff teams. So he'll be able to add at least, he has a first round pick and that's it. But I mean, that's more than any other playoff team remaining there.
Right. He also has his 26 picks.
Yeah. Yep. So he'll be able to have a little bit more added to his roster going into next year from the draft.
Yep.
All right. That brings us up to the finals matchup, which at this point we can reveal was Big and Flea.
You want to do the trades first?
Yep. We're going to go back. We're going to rewind here for a minute and go back to the trade section and cover all the trades that took place between the end of the semifinals and, well, I guess the end of the year. Where we last left off was Flea and Al trading Dante Pettis. So our next trade was between Big and JMC, wherein Big acquired Sincere McCormick and a 2025 second round pick, which is his own pick heading back to him. And in return, JMC picked up Jalen Wright, he of the Miami Dolphins.
Yep, JMC's been chasing Jalen Wright pretty much since the draft. Finally had a deal that Big would agree to. I know that Big wanted to keep Wright as kind of his HN handcuff insurance policy. So he was hesitant to do this, you know, basically until the final week when he knows that HN's going to play the final week, right?
Yep.
At this point, we knew that HN was not out with injury, so he was finally able to trade him.
Yeah, if he gets hurt after that, well, it's the offseason anyways.
Right. Yeah, he wanted to make sure that he got a little bit of extra draft capital in case he needed to make some last-minute moves.
And it was interesting. McCormick was hurt at that time, right? He'd already gotten injured.
He was on IR, yeah.
So McCormick would be able to go into the IR slot, and it wouldn't take up a spot on his roster. So this also freed him up to make some other trades.
Yep, he had maneuvered another open IR spot, so he was able to pull the trigger on this one. It's
interesting to me that Wright was able to fetch a second round pick. He's basically done nothing this year.
Well, he was a second round pick, right? And he hasn't done anything to lose value, really. I mean, we've seen flashes of what he's capable of. And if you're hoping that the offense kind of bounces back to what it was the year before when they were one of the most efficient rushing teams, and you figure that Mostert is probably going to get aged out of there now. He kind of was phased out a bit this year.
We've been thinking that about Mostert for like 4 years, though.
True, but this year he really was kind of phased out of the offense for most of the year. And we saw the heavy workload that HN handled. And we also know HN's size. You know, he's probably not going to handle a huge workload like that again. And with the investment that they made in Wright this year, they're probably not going to take another running back early again next year. So Wright seems pretty locked in to basically the same role that we thought he would have when he got drafted in the second round of rookie drafts last year.
Yeah,
I understand the thing.
Yeah, you say he didn't do anything to lose value, but he also didn't really do anything to establish value either. Again, he's got on the year, 30 fantasy points? 30.1. I mean, you expect a little bit more, especially because HN was hurt for a few games. Mostert's been in and out all season. I'm not saying he should have put up top 20 numbers or something, but I would have expected a little bit more, personally.
Yeah, I think it was pretty much the whole offense being broken this year and kind of hoping that it gets back to how it was the years prior.
Yeah, that is probably the case.
You're hoping
if
combined,
it's one of the guys that JMC really liked, go get your guy.
Right. I mean, you talk about the physical profile coming out, and this is a guy that was one of the fastest players at the combine, in this offense that previously had produced big plays pretty easily for the run game. Not so much this year, but we're hoping that they can get back to it next year.
So we're going to move on to our next one. Next one was between Flea and Flinch. So Flinch just eliminated at this point. Flea still alive heading into the finals. Flea picks up Devontae Adams, and in return, Flinch picks up Xavier Legette and Justice Hill. Was Justice Hill hurt at that point?
Yep, he was out with a concussion.
Yep,
Legette was also injured. He's been struggling through he has a wrist injury that needs surgery, and he's struggling through some other lower body injuries at this point.
Yeah.
It wasn't looking likely that he was going to play in the last couple of weeks. So again, this is her doing what she needs to do, kind of sacrificing the future, trading a couple of young guys for an older guy in Devontae Adams, but a guy that you can really bank on the production.
And in the past few weeks before that, Adams had put up 23, 47, 30, and 20 points. So that's after that was going back to New York's bye week. So obviously he played with Rodgers for years and been productive. So it made sense for her to pick up Adams and try to get over that hump. Even if Legette was fully healthy, I think she probably would have done this trade.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the upside that you get from Adams, obviously just in
47 points the week before.
In this very short sample size of the finals week, it's Legette can't get anywhere close to that. And I mean, even looking forward to next year, you can probably still safely project Adams to outscore Legette and Hill. So
yeah, it's
obviously more of a short-term trade because Adams is 10 years older at least than Legette.
Yeah, he's 32, Legette's 23.
Right. But at least for the end of this year and then probably even into next year, you're still looking at Adams as the more impactful fantasy contributor.
Yep.
So she again did what she needed to do. Added pieces to win now.
Yeah, and for Flinch, you're right, probably that Adams is the piece to have next year, but even that's somewhat iffy. And after that, it's no question that Adams will have either declined or be out of the league within a couple of years.
Yeah. This was a move for him looking forward to the future.
Well, I say no question, but I mean, I guess it is a question when you have modern medicine and guys playing later and better into their 30s than ever before. So who knows? Maybe Adams defies the aging process for a few more years.
Yeah, and Legette didn't exactly tear it up this year in a pretty broken offense for most of the season.
Yeah,
with not really a ton of target competition either. His future value is still very much in doubt as well.
Yeah, he's got at this point 467 yards, which is below most of those thresholds for, this guy's going to make it, this guy's not going to make it that you see, but could be injury related. That could be that offense struggling mightily, even outside of his work. It wasn't a disaster of a year, but he didn't do a ton to distinguish himself either.
Yeah. To be determined what's going to happen in this trade. We'll have to see how the rest of Legette's career plays out,
Yep. All right. We're going to move on to our next trade. This is our first of 2 Christmas Day trades because apparently spending time with your family can be be supplemented with fantasy football. And obviously this one, was very important. It had to be done immediately. It was between myself and Big, wherein I received KJ Osborne and Big received a 2025 5th round pick attached to Georgia Mike's roster. When you have to make a trade immediately, Christmas be damned.
This was not the Washington receiver that he was looking for.
So I don't remember how we came to this. I think Big was trying to free up roster space. He was like, hey, trade me a 5th for someone. And I went and took a look at his roster and said, I could go for a 5th for KJ Osborne. And then this trade was born.
Yeah, pretty much.
Basically, me gambling for where Osborne ends up next year. Maybe he contributes to someone. Osborne's one of those guys where I like the player. He's not super old. He's 27. He'll be 28 going into next year. He's had some decent years. It's a 5th-round pick. The previous to this season,
If you
he
get
put up
any points from a 5th-round
180.
pick, it's a win, right?
Yeah.
We've seen him be productive, right? He's been
Yeah.
productive on multiple rosters now. At this point, he looked like he was in a decent position when Brown went on IR. We weren't really sure who was going to step into that kind of wide receiver 2 role behind McLaurin. We saw a combination of a couple of different guys. Ended up being a different receiver that we'll get to shortly after this. But I mean, at this point, it could have been anybody. Osborne was as good a shot as any of them.
If he's not contributing now, he doesn't have a spot on Big's team, essentially.
Right.
But previous to this year where he was with New England and then Washington, when he was with Minnesota, he was a wide receiver 4 or 5 for each of the previous 3 years, putting up 143, 183, 180 points. If he returns to that, that's well worth a 5th-round pick.
Oh yeah, you would love to get that kind of return out of a 5th-round pick. Most 5th-round picks don't make it through training camp on your roster.
Exactly. So maybe he gets back to that. Maybe he doesn't. I'm not super worried about it. I doubt Big is either.
Yeah.
All right. So he needed some roster space, I guess. Let's find out why he needed it. Later that day, Big made a trade with JMC in which he picked up Olamide Zaccheaus and Jamison Crowder, the other Washington wide receivers. And in return, JMC picked up potential league winner Jeremy McNichols, Trey Palmer, Big, how dare you, Keelan Robinson, and this is an Al special here, Jaquan Jackson.
Had to get the Tennessee receiver in there.
Yep.
To get JMC to pull the trigger.
So JMC picking up, I don't know, one pile of garbage, Big picking up another one.
Yeah, I mean, he basically got rid of guys. JMC got rid of guys that he was pretty sure were not going to be contributors next year, to take some gambles on some guys that might be. I mean, going forward, you'd probably rather have the group that he got. But
Yeah.
Big certainly was happy he got your boy, Zaccheaus, because Zaccheaus went off the last couple of weeks of the year.
A timely acquisition. The Crowder one, it made sense to pick up both guys, I guess. Crowder at the time was coming off of a 16-point week.
Yeah, he's hedging his bets. He knew that someone in this offense was going to be productive in the passing game. And if he figured if he got enough of them, he would get it right, and it worked out.
Yep. This is end of roster shuffling. And Big sending out 4 for 2. Again, some of those guys, I think, coming off of the IR spots, makes sense to maintain flexibility because you knew he wasn't done adding pieces.
Yeah, and he added pieces that were far more likely to score points this week. In a best ball, it's very beneficial to add guys like this to your roster, to the end of your roster, because you never know. If you have a receiver playing heavy snaps on an offense that's productive, there's always a chance that they pop off and get in your lineup, and that's exactly what happened with Zaccheaus.
Let's go to our next trade. At least this one wasn't on Christmas, between Big and Al. This one pretty straightforward. Al, you picked up Sincere McCormick. Big picked up Brandon Cooks. This was after CeeDee Lamb was officially shut down for the year. McCormick was already out on IR. Pretty straightforward here. Cooks looked like he was going to be the number 1 wide receiver that week.
Yep. And he was. I mean, he ended up leading him in targets. Wasn't super productive. But then again, McCormick was on IR. So
I say he had double-digit points.
Yeah. It's not like McCormick was going to score any points.
Yep.
And for me, just taking a shot on a guy that, frankly, looked like by far the best Raiders running back all season, outside of these last couple of big Abdullah fantasy games. McCormick looked like the best runner on the team that they had all year. So, taking a shot, maybe he gets into a committee next year. Probably going to be a whole new staff. So we'll see how that works out.
With the front office, with the coaches. Yeah.
Right. But Brandon Cooks is not getting any younger. He, even in his supporting role as basically the number 2 receiver for most of the year when he wasn't injured, he wasn't super productive. So his run of being very productive has probably come to an end.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But it looked like a good bet for this week at least. So.
Yep. All right, let's keep going. Here's the real blockbuster. This is the most important trade we have covered this year. Between myself and Big on December 29th, I received a 2025 fifth round pick attached to Georgia Mike's roster, and Big picked up Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
He joked about putting himself in trade jail for a guy that was going to score 0 points. But you know what? He was actually elevated from the practice squad and immediately thrust into the running back 2 role, which was important because Kendrick Miller got hurt, shockingly. Kendrick Miller
who could have seen that coming.
Got hurt again. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire ended up being the main running back for the Saints for this week. Didn't do a lot for fantasy because he's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but it ended up
also because they're the Saints.
It ended up being a actually insightful pickup by Big.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Even if he wasn't going to get any snaps, I'm pretty sure this trade would have taken place the exact same way.
Right. Yeah, we didn't know that this was going to happen at this point of the trade, but it's just funny how it works out.
It's okay because Big and I am pretty sure are the only 2 Clyde Edwards-Helaire fans left in the league, so we'll just keep shuffling him back and forth between our rosters until he's out of the league. It's okay. You guys can just all relax on this one. We'll make it work. That's the same 5th round pick that I had literally just given Big a couple days before to acquire Osborne.
So this was it ended up being an Osborne for Clyde Edwards-Helaire trade in the end.
Yeah. So that one took place just before game day on Sunday, I believe. And we have one more trade that took place after the end of most of the games on Sunday. It was also between Big and myself. This one actually did come into a little bit of relevance here. So on this one, I received a 2025 second round pick attached to Big's roster. So at this point, we knew that pick was either going to be 11 or 12. And in return, Big picked up Craig Reynolds and Isaac Guerendo. Now, these 2 were playing each other in the Monday night game. And at this point, we knew that both teams in the finals matchup were putting up incredibly high scores.
Historic scores.
Yeah. And I believe Flea's team was mostly done going into that game. I don't think she had anybody who was...
Tim Patrick, I think.
She had Tim Patrick remaining, but no one that was, a huge fantasy name. And Big did have a bunch of guys like Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel remaining. Guerendo was going to be the starting running back for the 49ers on a Monday night game. And that's where the second round pick comes into play.
Yeah, this is one that we were kind of waiting for all week. We've seen pretty much every finals week where one or both teams kind of load up right before kickoff and try to extend the roster as much as they can to help themselves.
If you'll go back historically, I have been the recipient of that trade 3 of the last 4 years.
So this is your fault, what you're saying.
No, I
epidemic.
I don't know
of disgusting trades,
I,
which I am guilty of last year. So
yours last year was probably the worst. Jaron Hall. Was Clyde in that one too?
I don't know. There was a bunch of garbage in that one. Little Jordan Humphrey was part of it.
That's right. It seems to be that basically I'm usually in position to provide
a bunch of crap. Yeah, you have a bunch of crap on your roster.
End of bench guys. Yep.
The problem is this trade only makes sense for this week, right? Because the rest of the season, no one's going to bother loading up on a bunch of players because the benefit of maybe getting one more guy that can make your lineup versus having your roster locked. You can't make any ad drops. You can't make any trades. It doesn't make sense to do this at any other point in the year. But the finals week, this is the one where the benefits outweigh the negatives. So this is why we've seen it. I mean, year after year, it's been a strategy for the finals teams pretty much every season.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure that's why Big loaded up and acquired a bunch of draft picks in case he needed to make a trade like this.
I'm sure of it. My question is this where we should discuss how Flea has been unintentionally playing with one hand tied behind her back for the entirety of our time in the league?
I don't know that it's so much a hand tied behind her back. I mean, I do this too, where I make sure my roster is legal because at all times, whether I need to or not, because I don't want to ever be handcuffed and not be able to make a trade or an ad drop. You know, sometimes guys pop up during the week and I don't want to have to worry about, oh, I got to drop this guy first and then I can do this. I prefer to have my roster legal at all times. I don't think we see a lot of teams that are many players over, at kickoff.
I prefer to have my team illegal at all times unless I'm making a trade. I'm not kidding.
It certainly
I
did not
try
help
to
you
maximize the
get
amount
extra.
of guys on my roster all the time.
It did not
This is
help
why
you
I always
get
have
extra
that extra
wins.
crap to trade.
But it's not helping you get extra wins. So
No. Well, that's the thing. My roster has been non-competitive for the last 2 years.
I don't know that
two
it's a huge benefit for you in that points per week department.
No, absolutely not.
The guys we're talking about are generally fringe guys anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was shocking to not see a big kind of 5-for-1 or whatever trade like this beforehand. It took almost until the last game of the year. And it really was only one guy over anyway.
I think part of that was because Flea didn't really have any pieces left to trade at this point.
Yep.
And part of it was because I think Big was pretty confident in his roster until Flea started putting up massive points. And he may have thought he didn't need to do that.
Yeah, it was almost like a game of chicken.
Yeah. That brings us up to the eve of the finals here. Let's go take a look at the finals matchup.
And what a matchup we had.
Yeah. So the final score of this matchup was Big 315.34, defeating Flea, who put up a 298.01.
Unbelievable.
Big put up the number one all-time score in the history of the league in the finals.
Yeah.
And Flea put up what would have been the number 5 all-time score in the history of the league. But since Big put up a new number 1, hers is now number 6 all-time. This is an incredible score by both of these teams.
Yeah, you talk about fireworks. This matchup had everything. And it was so strange to see because we had this weird week where we had games on Wednesday and Thursday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday. So we had it all spread out. And we had big spike weeks. I mean, games in every day of the week, pretty much.
Every day. I know that we started off with, was it T. Higgins having 45 points? Was that Thursday night? I can't even remember what day anything was anymore.
I don't know.
We had games on Wednesday as well, but I don't remember who played who. I think that was Kansas City and Pittsburgh. Who was the other one? Doesn't matter. Not really relevant because an insanely high score from both these teams. If I was Flea, you would never hear the end of this, how I put up a score that would have beaten all but 5 teams since the inception of our league 4 years ago, and I somehow lost. You would never hear the end of that from me.
This was a heavyweight prize fight with both players just throwing haymakers for every punch. This was unbelievable. I mean, to see the scores go back and forth and just continue to climb over the course of the week, right up until the final snap on Monday night, was just incredible drama. And it really sucks that someone had to lose this matchup because both of these teams definitely deserve to win.
No, they both absolutely deserve a title for this. I don't know what's more impressive here. The fact that Big put up 315, his lowest score in his roster was an 11.7 in one of his flex spots from Brandon Cooks, who he literally acquired this week. Or on the other side of things, the lowest score from Flea's team was a 15.35. Despite the fact that she had the higher lowest score, she still lost, or the fact that he managed to put up 315 with an 11-point game in there. Like, both of those things are impressive.
I mean, go through the Spike Week players.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredible. There's so many of them.
So
how many players were over 30 points?
So
on both sides.
On Big side of things, he had 4 players over 30 points, and 2 of those players were over 40 points. Here's the incredible part of this. On Flea's side of things, she only had one 30-point day. I mean, now she had a 29.9 from Travis Kelce, so like we're skirting the line of 30-point day, but Evans was her only player over 30 points. You know, she had Darnold, Pierce, Kelce, Gesicki, all 27 or more. So like it's not like these guys were far off from a 30-point day, but we got to draw the line somewhere. But for big side of things, T. Higgins 45 points, Trey McBride 41.8. Good time for him to get that first touchdown.
Yeah, should have had a second touchdown.
Yep, probably. Hit him in the face. That's a tough one. Baker Mayfield 38 points. His QB2, Brock Purdy on Monday night, 32.5. Just these scores are, how do you go up against that?
Yeah, she certainly did her best.
Yeah, 27 from Darnold, 28 from Taylor, Bijan Robinson, her disappointing running back at 25. Mike Evans, 33, Alec Pierce, 27, Kelsey, 29, Mike Gesicki. We talked about this one briefly earlier. We should touch on this now. That trade that Flea and Big made in the semifinal round almost came back to cost him the finals, because in that trade, Flea acquired Gesicki and Aiden O'Connell, who both had very, very good weeks. I think probably their best weeks of the year. Gesicki put up 28.6, and Aiden O'Connell was her QB2, putting up a 19.33.
Yeah, and she needed those guys because the people who would have been in there at tight end 2 and quarterback 2 were nowhere next to that.
Yeah. Her quarterback 3 was Mason Rudolph, down at 11.27, which wouldn't have been her super flex. She had other guys that were in between those scores. I think Tajay Spears was at 13. Tolbert, I think, at 13. And her other tight ends, she just taken a 0. She had no other tight ends.
Yep. So that was a huge trade for her.
I mean, a timely acquisition, and one that 28 points from your tight end is almost like in a normal week, you get a 28-point game from your tight end. That's not a guarantee of a win, but that's a guarantee that you're probably beating the median.
Especially when your alternate score would have been a 0. So, I mean, it was it definitely was impactful.
Yeah. And she got that 29.9 from Kelsey. That was a Christmas Day game. That was a Wednesday.
Yep.
So we saw that one to open up the week. And then I think it was the next day that Higgins put up his 45 on Thursday. And we kind of at that point knew that we were, we had the potential to get some really impressive scores.
Yeah. And boy, did they continue to deliver.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it was just day after day, haymaker after haymaker, back and forth. It was crazy.
Yep.
This was definitely the most entertaining finals that we've had in this league's history.
Oh, especially because going into Monday night, like Big did
very
the
much
math
in doubt.
essentially, and he was like, "All right, this is what I need," and it wasn't like, I need 12 points from this guy and I win. Like, no, it was I need at least 8 points more at this position, at least this much, and basically it was he needed Sam Laporta and Brock Purdy to show up.
Yep,
and
he needed those guys to get in his lineup.
And both of those guys showed up in a big way. Laporta's obviously been on his team since the draft, but Purdy was, as we just discussed earlier on, was only acquired a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, those were important pieces. Big really put on a masterclass of acquiring talent and lengthening his roster, stuff that we've talked about all year. No one had a deeper, more talented team than Big this year. He had 30 guys that could score 20 points on a week and get into his lineup. There's no one else can match that. So he had not only the highest ceiling that we've seen, the highest ceiling ever, but he also had the highest floor.
Yeah.
And he spiked at the right time.
Now he's mentioned it a couple of times that his only losses this year were against Flea, which makes sense. Like her team was obviously one of the best in the league, and she made the finals for a reason.
Yep.
But he essentially wanted his revenge, and
that's the one thing that he had left to prove, that he could actually beat Flea's team this year, because that was the only team he hadn't been able to beat. And it took a historic performance to beat her.
Hold on, I'm doing some math right now.
It took the highest score that we've ever seen in the history of the league to beat her this week.
All right, so if he hadn't acquired Brock Purdy, the final score of this matchup would have been 298.1 to 298.01. That was the difference between Purdy and what would have been his next highest score, I believe, Kyler Murray.
So you're saying he didn't need that Brock Purdy trade after all?
I don't think so. I'm checking my math.
That would have been an even more terrible finish.
That is, I really wish we had gotten that. I really wish the Purdy trade hadn't taken place and we had gotten the .09 final score difference.
Listen, all this is because Flea beat my team the first week of the playoffs by one singular point.
What a year. I don't know. I have a lot of fun every year in this league, obviously, but seeing a finals matchup like this, I don't know, really makes it a lot of fun.
Makes me sad that we don't have any more meaningful football. I mean, for fantasy, for like 9 more months.
No more relevant fantasy football, but now the actual relevant football for the real league starts.
Yeah, we don't care about that. We only care about fantasy football.
The one thing about this matchup that I really feel the need to point out, what was the strength of Big's team this whole year that we discussed in the preseason that we mentioned every week?
It was running backs.
Yeah. Do you know who his 2 starting running backs were this week in the finals?
I do not.
Isaac Guerrero, who we acquired literally hours before his game, 15.65 was his running back 1. And his running back 2 was James Cook, who put up 11.8.
Yep.
Not featured in this matchup. Achan, Mixon, Jacobs. Who else does he have in there?
All the guys that have been carrying him all
Javante,
season.
James Conner, Trey Benson,
Again,
Brian Robinson.
This speaks to the depth and the talent of this roster.
Yeah.
Just an incredible collection of talent. I mean, he did, like I said, a masterclass of acquiring talent onto one roster. This was a best ball roster that you dream about.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap on the 2024 season there. Congrats to Big on the finals win. Well deserved. Flea, congrats on the runners up. You also deserved to win in many, many ways. And, I don't know what else to say.
At least we can finally stop talking about how good Big's team was.
Sure, for now.
It's been how many 17 weeks of this? I'm tired.
Yeah. Listen, we had to talk about your team last year. We're going to talk about his team this year.
My team was not this good.
I'm just hoping that he puts up a better finals, a better championship defense than you did.
We'll see. If half of his team ends up on IR, he'll still have a better roster than most of us. So
yep,
it's very possible.
There's so much variance year to year that it's impossible to know what the future holds. But
yep, so it makes this fun. It's time to look forward to 2025, since we're actually in 2025 now.
Yep, we'll have to get our off-season editions going soon. We'll do I don't know, a draft preview. We'll I don't know. We should cover who's got what draft pick because I don't know. Every year, 80% of the picks change hands.
Most of them
once.
have changed hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most teams again do not even have their own first round picks. So
no.
We'll get into some draft stuff coming up pretty soon. It's draft season now for us. Regular season's over.
Yep.
Forget about the NFL playoffs. We don't care about that. We want to talk combine. We want to talk NFL draft. This is Dynasty after all.
That it is. All right. So we'll I don't know. We still, as Big has told us before, we still need to get that what is it, the theme park story. So we'll bring Big on to give us the story that we didn't get to the last time, and to give him a chance to talk about his win this year.
Yep. I guess we'll have to talk about as good his roster is one more time at least.
We'll let you step out of the room for that one. I'll take over for 5 minutes. Well, probably longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah. Knowing Big, it will be longer than 5 minutes.
All right. Well, that wraps it up, and we're going to get out of here because we've been sitting here for like 2 hours now doing this.
Yep.
We will catch everybody soon, but until then,
see you in the league chat.